I am Margaret Delaney, 81 years old. People think the worst thing in life is dying alone. They're wrong. The worst thing is living while the people who claim to love you sleep peacefully above your head, knowing exactly where you are, choosing to forget you. For 10 years, I wasn't dead. I was in the basement. I was in my own home. My name still hung on the deed. My Bible was still on the nightstand. My photographs still lined the upstairs hallway. But I was below the floorboards, starving, listening, remembering. I own the Delaney farmhouse, bought it with my late husband in 1964, back when we still believed land meant freedom, not chains. We raised Elaine here, our only daughter. She was quiet, always watching, always one step behind my heels like a shadow I couldn't shake. I gave her everything, the kitchen recipes, the garden soil secrets, the lace from my wedding veil. When her father died, it was just us. I thought that meant something. I thought she'd protect the house. And me. Instead, she took both. People ask what I have now. I have the house. Legally, it's still mine. I have a name people suddenly remember again. And I have the truth. It used to terrify me, saying it out loud. It felt like holding a match over dry hay. But when your own daughter locks you in a concrete room and leaves you there long enough to forget your reflection, the fear burns away. What's left isn't fire, it's bone. I didn't plan to survive. The first year nearly broke me. The hunger, the silence, the cold. But something kept me breathing. Something beneath language or rage, a rhythm, a will. A throb in my chest that refused to stop. I started counting days by the sound of the front door, by the creak in the floorboards when they went to bed, by the seasons I could smell, but not see. I began to know their lives better than they did, what they whispered about, what they hid from each other, what they told the neighbors. They said I was in a nursing home, somewhere peaceful, by the coast, maybe. They even faked cards from me. Love, Mum, scribbled in a hand that had never been mine. And all the while, I was 10 feet beneath their feet, scraping bits of wallpaper from the corners, praying for rot to loosen the beams enough for someone to hear me. But no one did. Until now. And I'm done whispering. They say the walls of a home remember, that they hold on to voices, arguments, lullabies, laughter. I used to believe that. Back when the house felt like mine. Back when every creak in the floor was a comfort, not a warning. The Delaney farmhouse wasn't grand. 2 stories, white shutters, sloped porch. But it had a soul. You could feel it in the wood grain under your fingers, in the way the windows breathed with the wind. It was a living thing, and for most of my life, I treated it like one. I married Thomas in the summer of '62, and we signed the deed before we signed our marriage certificate. We raised Elaine in those rooms, painted the nursery ourselves. Every nick in the stair rail, every dent in the pantry door, it all had a story. Elaine fell on that 3rd step once, lost her first tooth there. I kept the tooth in a handkerchief for years, tucked inside a Bible. She hated that, said it was morbid, but I thought it meant something, proof that we lived here, that we mattered. After Thomas passed, it was just the 2 of us. Elaine never wanted to leave. At first I thought it was loyalty, love. But maybe it was possession. Maybe she stayed not to take care of me, but to take control of what she thought was already hers. She started talking about helping me. Said the house was too big. Said I forgot things. Maybe I did. Names, mostly. Times. The kinds of forgettings that come with age. But I still knew the sound of her voice when she was lying. I had heard it when she was 10 and blamed the broken glass on the wind. I heard it again when she said, "We're moving your bedroom downstairs, so it's easier for you." It wasn't easier. It was quieter. Too quiet. They moved my things piece by piece. My dresser. My armchair. But not everything. Not the piano. Not my books. Just enough to make the basement look like a room. Like a kindness. I didn't question it. Not yet. I told myself they meant well. I told myself this was what love looked like, after grief and time. But then the door started locking behind me. Not loud, not obvious, just a click. Subtle. Like a whisper you're not supposed to hear. I remember the last day the house still felt like mine. I was on the porch, watching the trees shift in the wind. I could hear a radio from the kitchen. Elaine laughing. For a second, I thought we were okay. That maybe I had imagined the tension. That maybe I was safe. But safety doesn't come with locks. And love doesn't come with silence. Elaine always had a soft voice and a harder heart. As a child, she clung to my skirts like ivy, always watching, always waiting. Never the loud one, never the type to throw tantrums or demand sweets. No. Elaine knew how to wait, how to watch from the corners. I mistook that for sweetness, mistook stillness for goodness. But still waters, I've learned, run deepest when they're hiding something. She met Patrick in college, a quiet man, same as her. His smile never quite reached his eyes. When they married, I offered them the house, told them it could be ours, all three of us. A family home, a place where generations could stay together. That used to mean something. I didn't realize I was signing the deed to my own disappearance. When Patrick moved in, things changed fast. Furniture shifted. My garden was paved over to make space for a second driveway. The sitting room became his office. Elaine said it was time for me to rest, that I'd done enough, that I should let them carry the weight now. At first I agreed. I was tired. My bones ached in the mornings. I misplaced keys, letters. I chalked it up to age. But slowly they began taking more than chores off my plate. They took my decisions, my routines, my mail. Patrick began doing the shopping. Elaine sorted the bills. One day, I realized I hadn't touched my checkbook in 6 months. When I asked, Elaine smiled that soft, rehearsed smile. "You don't need to worry about all that anymore, Mum. We've got you." They started treating me like a guest in my own home. Meals were served to me, not shared. Conversations filtered. The hallway lights dimmed earlier each night. I was always the last to know about birthday plans, church visits, even the weather forecast. And slowly, the upstairs became foreign ground. I was encouraged to stay on the main floor where it's safer. That's how they did it. Not all at once, not with force. With sugar, with soft hands, with gentle voices saying things like, "It's best this way," and "You deserve to relax now." I wanted to believe them. God help me, I did. I thought maybe this was what getting older looked like, becoming smaller in the eyes of your children. But I remember one afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table, the sun streaking through the blinds. I reached for a pen to write a grocery list and found it missing. Then the notepad. Then the drawer itself, emptied. I opened the next drawer. Empty. Another. Empty. No pens, no paper, no tools, no scissors. Everything sharp had been quietly removed. That's when I knew. They weren't caring for me. They were preparing for something. It was a Thursday. That much I remember. The weather was grey, not cold yet, but the kind of day that settles into your bones like a warning. Elaine brought me tea that morning. Chamomile, she said, for my nerves. I drank half before realizing it tasted strange, bitter somehow. But I didn't say anything. I never did. Not when her voice was kind, and her hands were gentle. That's the part that still haunts me. How easy it was to believe her when she smiled. That afternoon, she asked me to help her find something in the basement. Old tax forms, she said. Something to do with the house deed, which I hadn't seen in years. She took my arm like it was the most natural thing in the world and guided me down the narrow steps. The railing was cold under my hand. I remember counting the steps. 14. When we reached the bottom, she flicked on the single bulb. It cast a pale orange glow over the stone walls, the exposed pipes, the shelves stacked with boxes I hadn't touched in decades. There was a chair set out already, in the middle of the room. She told me to wait there while she looked through the files. I sat. I waited. I heard her footsteps move away, then pause at the top of the stairs. Then the light clicked off. Pitch black. I stood, stumbled forward, called her name. The door above slammed shut with a force that echoed like a gunshot. I ran to the stairs, but my hands found nothing. No railing, no door handle, no lock to pick. Just wood, solid, sealed. I screamed. Oh God, I screamed. Not words, just sound. Raw, desperate sound. I clawed at the wood. I banged with both fists until my arms went numb. No response, just silence. Then, the unmistakable sound of feet. Walking away. Elaine didn't run. She didn't panic. She walked, steady and slow, across the floor above me. A soft creak with each step. And then the creaking stopped. She was gone. I collapsed against the stone wall, my chest heaving. The dark was so complete it felt wet, like it soaked into my skin. I didn't know then how long I'd be down there. I thought maybe a few hours, a punishment for something, a test. I didn't know it would be years, 10 years. 10 years of rot, of silence, of listening to my life be lived without me. They told everyone I had gone to a care home. But I was always there, below them, listening. The first night in the basement was the longest of my life. I sat on the cold concrete floor, knees to my chest, listening to the house above like a prisoner tuning in to the sound of a world they can no longer touch. Pipes groaned. Floorboards creaked. A door slammed somewhere far off. The refrigerator upstairs hummed its low, steady rhythm like it always had, oblivious to the woman who used to own it now curled up in the dirt below. I don't remember if I slept. My body may have drifted, but my mind never left the room. The dark had weight. It pressed down on me, filled my mouth, climbed into my ears. I began talking to myself just to hear a human voice. My own name felt strange in my throat. Margaret, 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 as though saying it might keep me real. The hunger came quicker than I expected. My last meal had been toast and watery soup, if you could call it that. I found nothing in the basement but old canning jars filled with cloudy liquids and shelves lined with long-expired preserves. I cracked one open. The smell was rancid. I gagged and shoved it into the far corner. There was water, at least. A rusted faucet in the wall where the laundry sink used to be. It spat brown at first, then cleared. I drank with both hands, fast and desperate, letting it run down my chin like a child. That water saved my life, over and over again. The mold came next. It spread in the corners like a living thing, black and green patches crawling across the stone like bruises. I started naming them. The one by the boiler was Ruth. The one behind the old dresser I called Thomas, after my husband. It sounds mad now, but back then, madness was a companion, something to talk to, something that didn't lie. I kept time however I could, counting light shifts through the vent when it wasn't covered, measuring footsteps, tracking the rhythm of their lives above me. Morning tea, midday television, dinner, laughter, dishes clinking, the sound of Nora's feet running across the hallway. They said she looked like me. I wondered if she ever asked why I didn't write anymore, why her grandmother's voice had vanished from her life. Sometimes I would press my ear to the vent and whisper her name. Softly. Nora. Just once or twice, hoping the sound might travel upward and catch her heart the way a lullaby does. It never did. Elaine and Patrick never spoke about me, not aloud. I think that was the rule between them. Don't name the ghost. Don't let her rise. But I was there. I was always there. And even if they couldn't hear me, God did. There was an old trunk in the far corner of the basement, under a rotting tarp and a collapsed ironing board. I found it sometime in what I believe was the 3rd week, though time had already become a cruel riddle by then. My nails were chipped raw, my knees bruised from crawling in the dark. I remember running my hand along the edge of the lid, flinching as a splinter embedded itself beneath my thumb. But pain was proof I was still there, still alive. Inside the trunk were fragments of the woman I used to be. Photo albums, yellowed and curling at the edges, my old wedding shoes, Thomas's army medal, and at the very bottom, bundled in twine, were the letters, dozens of them, all written in my hand, my words, my ink. Some were addressed to Nora, others to old friends, a few even to myself, things I meant to send, things I never got around to, and things I soon realized that Elaine had taken before they ever left the house. I held the first one to my chest, like scripture. Dear Nora, I'm so proud of the young lady you're becoming. I never finished reading it. My hands were trembling too hard, page after page of affection, of stories, of memories, gathered and hidden away like contraband. There were warnings too, quiet ones. Notes I'd written about how Elaine had changed, how Patrick had begun whispering when he thought I couldn't hear. Letters where I questioned whether they were stealing from me or planning something worse. Elaine must have found them, read them, and instead of confronting me, she erased them. Silently, carefully. She never needed to scream. Her violence was neat. I stared at those letters for hours, trying to remember who I was when I wrote them. I could see it, me in the upstairs den, sunlight on my shoulder, Nora's drawing on the wall, my handwriting steady and clean. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone thinner, dirtier, with hair like straw and eyes that had forgotten how to cry. But those letters, they mattered. They were proof that I had doubted them, proof that I had tried to speak, and proof that they had silenced me long before they locked the door. I reread every one, over and over, until the pages softened under my fingers. Then I tucked them beneath a loose stone near the laundry pipe, my new hiding place, my archive, my voice, preserved. They thought they'd buried the truth down there with me, but I had left it everywhere. Ink doesn't forget. The first winter nearly killed me. The cold didn't creep. It crashed in. It came through the cracks in the foundation, through the floor above, through the very walls that had once kept me warm. By December, the air down there was sharp enough to bleed my lips and freeze my breath to the stone. My fingers turned white, then blue. I couldn't feel my toes. And then the water pipe burst. It happened overnight. I woke to the sound of a hissing leak, followed by a slow, sickening drip. I scrambled toward it in the dark, slipping on the wet concrete. Water spread fast. Within an hour, it was pooling around my ankles, rising like the house itself wanted to drown me now that starving hadn't worked. I tried shouting. I screamed until my throat felt scraped raw. No one came. The next day, I stopped yelling. I learned to wait. I used a broken broomstick to clear debris from the floor drain, praying the water would find its way out. It trickled, slowly, enough to keep it from swallowing me whole. But the cold, God, the cold, it stayed. It stayed like grief, lingering, hungry, heavy. I took to wrapping myself in old curtains I found in a storage bin, layering them over my shoulders like shawls. I huddled next to the furnace, even though it hadn't run in years. It was symbolic warmth, just something to lean against, something to pretend with. That's when I began to change. Something in me shifted. I stopped praying for rescue and started preparing for survival. I took a rusted pipe from the side wall, disconnected from anything long ago, and began using it to pry open forgotten vents and dig through insulation. In the corner behind the old freezer, I found a patch of condensation forming on the wall. Cold, but wet. I scraped it with the flat side of the pipe, letting the droplets collect into a bowl I'd salvaged. I drank what I could. It tasted like metal and mold, but it kept me from slipping into fever. I gave the pipe a name. Mercy. She became my companion in that bleak, airless tomb. With her help, I carved out paths, opened up airflow, even managed to bang twice on the ceiling beam loud enough that a picture upstairs once fell. Elaine blamed the cat. I heard her say it. Laughed to herself as she swept up the glass. I didn't laugh. Not then. I hadn't made a sound in days. I was saving my breath for something better. Even then, shivering, soaked, barely more than a skeleton, I knew something they didn't. You can bury a person under cold, under silence, under hunger, but you can't bury someone who remembers. And I remembered everything. It was my birthday. I only knew because I heard them say it. The voices floated down from the dining room above like ghosts in reverse. Cheerful, light, filled with laughter. Nora's voice was louder now, nearly a teenager, more confident than the little girl who used to trace her finger along the edge of my teacups. Patrick uncorked something. I heard the fizz. Then Elaine's voice, bright and sugary, announcing to the room, to Mum, wherever she is. I sat directly beneath them, knees to my chest, spine pressed against the cold foundation. My hands trembled, not from cold this time, but from fury. That was the cruelest thing about being buried alive in your own home. You never really left the family. You just watched them carry on. Like your absence was a joke they all agreed not to explain. They toasted me with champagne while I drank mildew-soaked condensation from a chipped bowl. They sliced cake while I gnawed the corner of an old cereal box for texture, for memory. The song stung the most. I didn't cry when the lights first went out, not when the food ran out, not even when I found the mouse drowned in the old mop bucket. But when they sang Happy Birthday to a woman they'd buried just feet below their clinking forks and sugar-glazed laughter, I broke. Quietly. The kind of cry you don't make noise for. The kind that just leaks from you. Then something changed. I heard Nora ask, "Why doesn't Grandma call anymore?" Her voice held no sarcasm, just curiosity, a small fracture in the lie. Elaine answered quickly, something about poor phone service at the facility, how I was resting a lot these days. But I heard it. Nora doubted. Just a little, just enough. It stayed with me, that question. It wrapped around me like a thread pulled from a distant sweater. I clung to it. Because if Nora remembered me, really remembered me, then I wasn't gone. Not all the way. Not yet. The party upstairs grew louder. Glasses clinked. Music played. Someone mentioned my lemon pie, laughing about how no one could ever get it quite right. I wanted to scream through the floorboards. You never even tried. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, tracing every knot in the wood above me, imagining which one sat directly beneath the birthday candles they'd lit in my name. I made a promise to myself that night. I'd live to see those same people eat their cake in silence. I'd live long enough to speak for myself, because the dead don't tell stories. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. The recorder was buried beneath a pile of rusted holiday decorations and broken picture frames. I found it by accident, my fingers brushing against something smooth and cold as I reached behind a fallen box in the crawl space. It was heavier than I expected. Black, scuffed. The kind with a little red button and a cassette window fogged from age. It still had batteries. I turned it over in my hands like it was something sacred. It took me 3 nights to press play. I wasn't sure what I was more afraid of, hearing a voice or hearing nothing. But when I finally did it, the old speaker crackled and spat static, then silence, then my own voice from years ago, a Christmas recording, Nora laughing, me singing off-key, the room tilted, the memory too sudden, too alive. I turned it off and wept. But then I knew what I had to do. I cleaned out the inside of the recorder with an old t-shirt soaked in water. It whirred reluctantly, like a heart trying to beat again. And then I pressed record. The first thing I said was my name. My name is Margaret Delaney. I was born in 1942. I am alive. And this is where they put me. My voice sounded thinner than I remembered, more gravel than silk. But it was mine. I kept talking. For hours. I told everything. I started with the day Elaine brought me tea. I listed what I ate, what I drank, how the floor felt beneath my fingers. I described their routines, their lies, their smug footsteps overhead. I recited the names of every person I'd once known, like a prayer chain, like a promise to the world that I hadn't forgotten where I came from. The tapes became my gospel, my proof. I'd hide them in different parts of the basement, inside the vent, beneath the broken furnace, wrapped in a blanket under the stairs. I imagined someone finding them one day, like bones unearthed from the dirt. They'd know I wasn't crazy. I wasn't old and confused. I was buried, erased, but not silent, not anymore. One night, I recorded a message just for Nora. You used to hold my hand when we crossed the street, I whispered. You used to draw suns with faces on them and tape them to my refrigerator. I don't know what they've told you about me, darling, but I'm still here. I never left. I remember your laugh. I remember your blue shoes. I remember you. After that, I slept. For the first time in weeks, I curled up beneath the stairs, the recorder beside me like a heartbeat, and I slept. Not because I was safe, but because I had finally begun to speak, even if no one was listening yet. I was no longer just surviving, I was documenting. It was a Tuesday, I think, or maybe a Sunday. Down there, days didn't come with names, just temperatures, echoes, and the way the footsteps fell above. But I remember this one because the footsteps were different. Lighter, quicker, skipping almost. And then, a bark. Nora's dog. I hadn't heard him in months. He used to scratch at the back porch. That morning, I heard claws on the deck again, then the squeak of the storm hatch handle. Rusted, stiff, barely used. The door groaned open like it had been sleeping. My heart shot into my throat. I froze. Then, her voice. Lucky, no, get back here. The dog was running. I could hear his nails clicking against the boards, snuffling near the edges of the old cellar entrance. A small thud, a grunt. Then a second voice, louder now, closer. Hello? I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Instead, I reached for the pipe, Mercy, I'd called her, and tapped. 3 soft knocks on the floor joist, then silence, then 3 more. It was a code I made up, silly, really. But in that moment, it felt like a prayer knocking back. The dog barked once, sharply. Nora's footsteps shifted. Hello? Is someone down there? Still, I said nothing. My throat was too dry, my heart too loud. I crouched beneath the far beam, hands shaking. I heard the hatch creak again as it opened farther. Light poured in, just a sliver, just enough to paint a line across the wall. I crawled toward it, slow, like a ghost. My hands found the edge of the concrete ledge. The gap was barely wide enough for me to reach up. I tapped again. 3 knocks. Then, her voice. Grandma. That word hit me like a resurrection. It had been so long since I'd heard it with meaning, so long since it hadn't been followed by a lie. She said it again, this time trembling. Grandma? I pressed my face close to the light and whispered, Nora! She gasped. I heard something drop. Her footsteps scrambled back, then forward again. Oh my God. Oh my God, what? What is this? I closed my eyes. The tears came without warning, hot and fast. My fingers gripped the stone. Don't tell them, I rasped. Please. For a moment, she said nothing. Just breathed. Then, okay. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She stayed. And from that moment on, I wasn't alone anymore. Hope didn't burst in like a fire. It crawled in through that hatch. Quiet. Careful. Wearing blue sneakers and a backpack full of questions. And for the first time in 10 years, I believed in rescue. Nora returned the next morning, early, just after sunrise. I was already awake, curled beneath the old tarp, afraid it had all been a dream. But then the hatch creaked open again, and there she was, kneeling over the edge with a flashlight in one hand and a lunchbox in the other. I brought food, she whispered, like it was contraband. I could barely speak. My voice had gone hollow from too many years unused, but I managed a thank you as she lowered the box by a knotted rope. Inside, a sandwich, a boiled egg, a bottle of water, and a folded napkin with a sun drawn in orange crayon, just like she used to. I didn't eat right away. I cried first. She stayed above the hatch while I sat beneath it, both of us holding the same moment in different ways. She asked questions, quiet, halting ones. I answered as best I could. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. They told me you were in a home, she said. That you didn't want to be bothered. They told you what they needed to believe, I said. Her silence was deep, heavy, then, softly. I don't think I believe them anymore. It broke something in me, something I thought had fossilized long ago. For years, I had lived under the weight of their lies. But in that moment, with her voice trembling like a candle in the wind, I felt the truth begin to rise. She came every day after that, sometimes with food, sometimes with stories. We built a rhythm. She'd tap 3 times on the hatch to let me know it was her. I started recording again, this time not just for myself, but for her. I told her everything over those days. How they moved me downstairs, the locks, the cold, the lies. She asked why I hadn't screamed louder, why I hadn't broken the door. They made me believe no one would listen, I said. She wiped her eyes and whispered, I'm listening now. And she was. Every word, every breath. She wrote it down, piece by piece. I watched her become the person they never wanted her to be. Curious, angry, awake. Elaine noticed the shift. I could hear it in her voice. The tension, the suspicion. "Where are you off to now?" she asked one afternoon. Nora hesitated. "Just outside, with Lucky." Elaine's voice tightened. "You've been awfully distant lately." "So have you," Nora snapped and slammed the door behind her. That was the day I knew things were changing. Not just in Nora, but in the house. The air felt different, like the lies that had sealed the doors were beginning to loosen. Blood, I'd once believed, was the strongest bond. But sitting beneath the girl who refused to let me disappear, I realized something else. Love, real love, isn't inherited, it's chosen. And Nora had chosen me. It was bound to happen eventually. Elaine's eyes had always been sharper than her words. She could sense when something was slipping, when control was bleeding through the cracks. And Nora, God bless her, was starting to glow with defiance. She moved differently, asked fewer questions, took longer walks. And most of all, she stopped looking afraid of her own thoughts. One afternoon, I heard Elaine stop her at the back door. "You're always running off lately," she said, her tone sweet but stiff, like icing hiding poison. "Where do you go?" Nora hesitated. I held my breath beneath the floorboards. "Firewood," she said quickly. "You said we'd be short this winter. I've been stocking the pile near the storm hatch." Elaine didn't answer right away. I imagined her squinting, running the math in her head. She didn't know Nora was clever like that, thoughtful. She had underestimated her. Eventually, I heard Elaine hum a skeptical, and walk away. But the suspicion had landed. I felt it vibrate through the floor like an approaching storm. That night, Nora came to the hatch later than usual. Her hair was pulled back, her shoes muddy, and her voice tight with worry. "She followed me halfway," she whispered. I had to double back through the garden. I wanted to tell her to stop, that it wasn't worth the risk. But I couldn't. Not when her eyes, so wide, so much like mine at that age, burned with purpose. She handed me a folded blanket, a tin of crackers, and a tiny red notebook. "Write it down," she said. "All of it, in case something happens." The notebook was no bigger than my palm. Its cover was frayed. Inside, the pages were lined and clean. I stared at it like it was gold. I wrote by the beam of her flashlight. I wrote the first time Elaine took my mail. The first time Patrick changed the locks. The day they moved my chair downstairs and called it help. The night they turned off the light and never came back. Every entry felt like a nail, not in a coffin, but in the frame of the truth I was rebuilding from the ruins. Nora would listen while I read pieces to her, my voice hoarse, thin, but steady. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. But mostly she sat in silence, letting my words fill the spaces where lies had lived for too long. She was my lifeline, my witness. But that week, I saw something else in her. Something sharper, more dangerous. She wasn't just collecting the truth. She was planning something. Something brave. Something reckless. And in her young hands, I saw the fire I no longer had the strength to start. It began with Nora's whisper. She leaned over the hatch that night, her voice tight with urgency. "I found the paperwork," she said. "You still own the house. Everything. The land, the deed is in your name. I stared up at her, stunned. She told me she had it changed. She didn't. She never filed anything. She just lied. For a moment, the basement seemed to swell around me. The cold air pulled tighter. The stone walls, the beams, the pipes. They had held me all these years, but they had never known why. Until now. Then I can get out, I said. Nora nodded slowly. But we can't just walk you out. Not yet. She'd call the police. Or worse. Then what? She looked over her shoulder, the flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. I have an idea. It was her plan, every detail. I just had to trust her. The next night, she slipped me a burner phone, a cheap plastic one, barely bigger than a deck of cards. I charged it using an old wall outlet behind the water heater. It still worked. Miracles came in strange forms these days. I waited. I waited while Nora left bait upstairs, a conversation loud enough for Elaine to hear, about voices in the walls, about hearing footsteps from the basement at night. The next morning, I heard Elaine pacing, doors opening and slamming, her voice tight on the phone. I swear, I hear things too. Fear was creeping in. And fear, for someone like Elaine, was dangerous, but it was also useful. That night, I recorded one final message. I tapped on the pipes 3 times, slow and deliberate. Then again. Then again. The same rhythm, over and over. Elaine heard it. I know she did. I heard her heels pound across the floor upstairs. Then silence. Then, boom. A crack. A loud one. I froze. Dust fell from the ceiling. A piece of drywall thudded against the floor near the hatch. Nora had warned me this might happen. The beams are soft near the pantry, she'd said. If you hit them just right, she'll think the house is falling apart. Another thud. A scream. Elaine shouted for Patrick, accused him of hiding something. "What did you do down there?" she cried. For the first time in years, I smiled. The house was speaking now, my house, and it wasn't whispering anymore. Elaine called in a contractor the next morning. I recognized his voice, Mr. Holbrook from town. He used to fix our gutters before Elaine took over. He had kind eyes, a quiet way of moving. I remember him once helping Thomas lift a dresser into the back of the truck while I brought out lemonade. That was years ago, a lifetime ago. Now he stood in my house again, upstairs, inspecting the creaks and cracks with a flashlight and clipboard. I lay silent beneath the pantry floor, breath shallow, as dust rained down from every step they took. "She says it sounds hollow here," I heard him say. "It's always done that," Elaine replied sharply. "No," he answered. "This sounds different, like there's something beneath." I felt it before I heard it. A heavy thunk as he tapped the beam directly above my chest. Then another. Then silence. Then the words that would change everything. "Has this space ever been opened?" Elaine's voice shifted. "It's just storage. We sealed it off years ago." "Funny," he said. "There's fresh air coming through the crack." Fresh air. Because Nora had pried open the vent again that morning. Just a little. Just enough. Then came footsteps. Multiple sets. The sound of Holbrook climbing down to the old exterior hatch. I heard the rattle of the lock. The groan of metal hinges. My body tensed. My heart thundered. The hatch creaked open. Light poured in. "Hello?" he called down. And I, Margaret Delaney, 81 years old, cloaked in rags and shadows and silence, stepped into the light. The look on his face was something I'll never forget. Not fear, not confusion, but recognition, like seeing a ghost and realizing it's still breathing. "My God," he whispered. "Mrs. Delaney." Elaine's scream tore through the house seconds later, then running, then shouting, then Nora. "Call the sheriff," she cried. "Call everyone." I was helped up the stairs by hands that had once painted my porch railing. The kitchen, when I emerged, was brighter than I remembered. Everything gleamed falsely, floor too clean, flowers too perfect. But the lie was crumbling, and everyone knew it. Elaine stood in the corner, white as the flour she used to dust her pies. Patrick sat slumped in a chair, speechless. And Nora stood beside me like a flame refusing to go out. The sheriff came within the hour. I handed them the notebook, the tapes, my story. And when they asked how long I'd been down there, I said it without flinching. 10 years. And the house, once so silent, seemed to exhale. The news spread like fire across dry brush. Small towns don't hold secrets well. Not the big ones, anyway. And this one? This was the kind of story people would whisper about for generations. "Did you hear what happened at the Delaney house?" "No, not the daughter. The mother. She was alive the whole time." By morning, reporters were parked across the street, their vans humming and blinking. Cameras pointed toward my broken porch, waiting to catch a glimpse of the ghost they said came back from the dead. But I wasn't a ghost. I was a woman who remembered everything, and now they would too. The sheriff asked if I wanted to press charges. "Yes," I said. He didn't need to ask more. Elaine and Patrick were arrested in silence. No one cried, not even Nora. She stood beside me on the porch as they were handcuffed and led to the car. Elaine looked at me just once. No apology, no shame, just rage, thin and shaking beneath her perfect skin. Patrick kept his head down. Of course he did. He always did. The social worker, a kind woman with coffee-stained teeth and tired eyes, asked where I wanted to go. "We can find you a place," she said. "Somewhere warm, safe, with people your age." I shook my head. "I'll be staying here." She blinked. "Here?" "This is my house." She looked at the wrecked siding, the garden overgrown with weeds, the wind-chimed porch Nora had begun to repair. "All right," she said gently. "We'll help you fix it up." Nora helped me clean that night. We started with the kitchen. She scrubbed the counters while I wiped down the old spice rack, remembering which ones Elaine had thrown out. I found my apron. It still smelled like cinnamon and dust. Later, she curled up beside me on the couch, her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry it took so long," she whispered. I stroked her hair. "You came when I needed you." She looked up at me, her eyes tired but blazing. "You always said truth rises." "It does," I nodded, "even from a basement." The next day, I walked through town for the first time in a decade. People stopped in their tracks. They stared. Some wept. Some reached out as if touching me might prove I was real. I smiled. I waved. I let them stare. Because I had nothing to hide anymore. I had spent 10 years in the dark, forgotten. But now I was the light. And the truth had finally come home. They tried to bury me. Not with dirt, but with silence. Not with chains, but with kindness weaponized. Tea laced with obedience, words folded in false concern, soft smiles hiding sharpened plans. But the basement didn't kill me. It shaped me. I live upstairs now, in the room with the big window that faces the garden. Nora and I fixed the glass pane together. She laughed when we discovered the original frame still beneath the boards Elaine had nailed shut. "She covered everything beautiful," Nora said. And I whispered back, "But nothing was truly gone." I still wake up before dawn, habit stitched deep into my bones. The air is warmer now, though. It smells like lavender and wood polish, not mold. I drink real coffee, not silence. I eat toast I can taste. I walk barefoot on creaky floors and let them creak. This house has a voice again, and so do I. Elaine and Patrick are awaiting trial. The evidence is overwhelming. My voice on the tapes, the letters, the deed in my name, the testimony of a granddaughter who refused to stay silent. The town stands with me. They bring casseroles and flowers and too many questions. I answer the ones I can. Some, I never will. What do you say to people who ask how you survived? I tell them I remembered. I remembered who I was before they tried to erase me. I remembered the feel of my husband's hand, the sound of Nora's baby laugh, the names of herbs I used to grow in my windowsill. Memory was my rebellion. Love was my armor. And Nora was my salvation. She visits every day after school. We sit on the back porch and sip lemonade while Lucky runs laps in the yard. She brings me books and asks for stories, not just of what happened, but who I was before. And I tell her everything, every garden I grew, every pie I baked, every storm I waded through with Thomas at my side. She writes them all down. She says one day she's going to publish my story. Not to shame them, she told me once, but to remind people what silence costs. I smiled. You already have. The basement is sealed now, not with locks, but with light. We gutted it, scrubbed the walls, painted them white. Nora insisted we leave one corner untouched, the one where I hid the notebook. History needs a scar, she said, so it doesn't forget to heal. I often sit by the window now, watching the breeze rustle the trees and the sun warm the porch. I don't think about revenge anymore. I think about resilience. Because in the end, the darkness didn't win. I did. And the house, my house, knows it.